Textbook Japanese versus real-life native Japanese. Number 1. Overusing ですから and ますから which means something like because. Did you notice I said overusing instead of just saying using ですから and ますから? This is not black and white because we do use ですから and ますから in some situations. So it's not about simply using them or not. It's about how we use them. So don't be angry if you hear Japanese people say these words. Now take a look at these examples from Genki, where young students are talking to each other in informal situations using ですから ますから and their variations. It's very unlikely the students use ですから and ますから to talk to each other in these kinds of everyday situations. So what do we use instead? Well, we would use んで、ので、or から。で, by the way, is just a contraction of ので. So it's basically ので or から。Check out this real-life conversation from my interview video.
そもそもそんなテレビを見ないんで、あんまりわからないです。
Did you notice that he used で to say because? If this was a textbook, it could be something like 見ませんから instead of 見ないんで. And remember, this real-life conversation is perfectly polite. He's using this, which we typically use with strangers and people who are older than us. And んで in this example is not rude at all. It's a pretty common way of speaking Japanese with strangers in real life. I still have the footage of this interview, and none of us use ですから and ますから. But what about more formal situations? So I looked for business interviews on YouTube and I found this one. It's a pretty long sentence, so don't worry about understanding everything. Just pay attention to ので or から。
9時とかにマーケットが開くときにみんなが情報を持ってなきゃいけないんですよ。だからその前までに全部の情報が整理されてなきゃいけないので、僕らはやっぱ情報を提供する仕事でもあるので。
なるほど。
Now this conversation is interesting because he said because 3 times. He said だからなきゃいけないので and あるので. If this was a textbook, it will be something like ですから instead of だからなきゃいけませんから or if this was みんなの日本語, it could be なければなりませんから instead of なきゃいけないので and 仕事でもありますから instead of 仕事でもあるので. But as you can see, this is a more formal situation than my street interviews. But still, there's a lot of ので or から instead of ですから and ますから. So when do we use ですから and ますから? Because as I said, some people do use them in some situations. Interestingly, I actually found ですから in the same interview. Take a look at this.
そんなね仕事をしてたわけですから、なんか得たものありますか？
得たもの。
And this way of using ですから is pretty interesting because it's kind of like he's emphasizing the fact that the guest was working so much. Or it could be because he was talking to the other person instead of himself. So he made it extra polite by saying ですから instead of だから. Can you see there's room for different interpretations? Natural language is like this. There's a lot of ambiguity. Your intentions don't always translate to other people's interpretations. And I found another example of ですから here.
いや最強軍団ですから。
まあ確かに。
Here, I feel the emphasizing effect of ですから because he's talking about how his team is the strongest team. So in my opinion, this is more about emphasizing than being respectful. And by the way, if you watch Konosuba, this character Aqua, she always uses this expression, ですけど, not because she wants to be polite, but because she wants to protest. So these are interesting ways of using these expressions that textbooks never talk about. So in this interview, there are some examples of ですから. But how often did they use it? So I counted the number of times that they use んで、のでから and ですから and ますから. And here's the results. They used んで、のでから 39 times. But they used ですから and ますから only 3 times. Less than 10%. So it seems like they used んで、のでから as neutral ways of saying because. But when they want to add some nuances, they used ですから and ますから. So what have we observed so far? The first thing is textbooks often teach you low-frequency words instead of high-frequency words. And if you replace high-frequency words with low-frequency words, there's a good chance that it sounds unnatural. The next thing is real-life native Japanese is complex and full of subtle nuances, while textbook Japanese is more like a simplified Japanese devoid of real-life richness, which can be a good thing if you want to learn that kind of Japanese. So I'm not saying textbook Japanese is wrong. If you prefer something simple, even if it doesn't sound native-like, I think it's a valid choice. But if you find the complexity of native Japanese fascinating, like I do, you can totally learn it. And if you want to learn Japanese with me, I will teach you real-life native Japanese that real-life Japanese people speak to each other while being perfectly polite. So click on the link in the description and subscribe to my email group. Now, the video is not over because I did more research on this. I actually thought about a much more formal situation, like Prime Minister speaking at the press conference. And I found something interesting. Take a look at this.
私が指名しますので、指名された方は近くのスタンドマイクの前に進み出て、所属と名前を名乗ってから質問を行ってください。
Now, this is actually the facilitator that's speaking. But did you notice that he used node? So in this kind of pretty formal situation, you can perfectly use it. But listen to our Prime Minister, who, by the way, isn't going to be Prime Minister anymore. But watch this.
そういった政治家の意地みたいなものがありました。ですから、この国会が閉幕してから先送りできない課題について、
Now he used ですから。But how about ますから? I analyzed a couple of hours of footage, but I couldn't find a single example of ますから. So here's the thing. ですから is already less common than ので or から. But ますから is even less common. And I have a theory about this. There's a thing about から that might sound a bit aggressive or defensive in some situations. For example, let's say somebody asks you, why are you late? And you want to say, because the train was late. Compare these sentences. 電車が遅れたから。電車が遅れたので。When you end a sentence like this with から, it might sound a bit defensive. So ので can be more neutral. And maybe because of this kind of subtle nuance, people use ですから more than ますから to kind of mitigate this effect. But it's just a theory. A Japanese theory. Because I don't know everything. I only know what I know. But I do know a great deal about real-life native Japanese because I analyze it a lot. So if you want to learn Japanese with me, I will teach you real-life native Japanese that native Japanese speakers communicate with each other and explain the complex nuances of native Japanese. So click the link and subscribe to my email group, Japanese with Yuta.